So I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. We'll do some introductions of myself and my co-host, Ann Pinder. Ann Pinder is having trouble with her camera, so she'll be just a beautiful floating voice for us today. And then we'll talk about the history of the Camino, AGC's Camino trip, what the accommodations and food are like, and then we'll go through the question and answer session. So my name is Julie Fast. I'm currently working as the Director of Guest Services and Sales at AGC. I joined AGC in 2019 as a program manager, and then in 2022, I got to go on the Camino trip with AGC and got to meet Ann Pinder in person. And then I've done a couple through hikes, longer sojourns, just solo on my own for personal travel. And then Ann, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, well, I'm from Grinnell, Iowa, as I just mentioned. I've lived in Madrid for way more than half my life. We don't need to go into all those gory details. But my first Camino was in 1989, which gives you a little bit of an idea of how long I've been here. I really, really love the Camino. I've been back many times since 1989, and I've been guiding for AGC on the Camino since 2015. And prior to that, another 10 years. So it's a part that I know quite well and really, really enjoy the Camino and enjoy guiding.
Terrific. Thanks, Ann. So a brief history of the Camino de Santiago. As we can see here, according to legend, after St. James passed away, he was transported to Galicia by two disciples in a boat led by angels. And the king at the time commissioned a temple to attract pilgrims from all over the world. Christians then made the long journey from their homes to Santiago de Compostela to reduce their time in purgatory after death. And the Camino has evolved a lot, but the sentiments are still there. A lot of people still embark on that journey from their place of residency and walking to Santiago. And then later, the Camino Frances is considered the most well-known Camino. It has the most infrastructure around it. And that was in part because King Sancho the Great and King Alfonso the sixth, they built the monasteries, hospitals, and bridges for pilgrims to continue along this well-preserved route. And anything you'd like to add?
Well, just a little bit past that, the high point of the Camino really was the centuries 11th to 13th, more or less. In the 14th to 16th century, the Black Death, the plague, was all over Europe. So there were not so many people traveling. Then in the 16th century, Catholicism fell apart thanks to Henry VIII in England, Martin Luther, and John Calvin. And then the funny thing about the 16th century, toward the end of the 16th century, and the pirates for Francis Drake was raiding on the Galician coast, and the people in Santiago decided they should hide the relics to make sure St. Francis didn't steal them or kidnap them. They hid the relics and lost them. So the relics were lost for 3 centuries. I have heard another version of that they thought that the king Philip II might ask for the relics. And instead of saying no to the king, which would have been really difficult, they said they were lost because they were trying to protect them. And in recent years, the Camino really started going again in 1993, which was Holy Year. That's when St. James Day falls on a Sunday. St. James Day is on July 25th. And that was the year that UNESCO declared St. James World Heritage Site. So that's when it really started going again. And you can see different surges of the Camino in different nationalities at different times. And right now, and of course, what really helped get the Camino out there for people from the States was the movie The Way. So,
Who here, by a response in the chat box, has seen the movie The Way with Martin Sheen?
a tiny note, Julie, and for those of you who haven't heard, a sequel is coming out for the movie.
Oh, exciting. Do you know the timeline?
No, I apparently it's done and they've had some licensing issues.
Mm.
But it's everybody who has seen that's probably looking forward to finding out what happened to the walkers.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Camino today, even though there are over 200 registered routes for the Camino, there are 7 that are considered the most popular and have the most infrastructure around them and are the quote easiest to do as a pilgrim. So the Camino Francés, where we walk, and then the Portuguese way, the North way, the Primitive way, the way of the gold, or of the metal rather, the English way, and then the end of the earth or the Finisterre way. And Anne has done quite a few of these routes. And which ones have you done?
Well, I've done the Camino Francés, which is the black dot one that you're seeing starting at Saint Jean Pied de Port. And I actually walked that towards Santiago, and I walked it away from Santiago, like medieval pilgrims would have to do to walk home. I've done the English route. I did one that's not on there, which is the variation of the Via de la Plata. And I've done the Portuguese route from Porto. And those are all, oh, and the route to Finisterre several times, which is lovely.
And you also biked one, correct?
Well, my first Camino experience in 1989 was by bike. And having biked and having walked, I can say walking is better. You see a lot more, you experience a lot more, and you talk more to other people.
And some of those steep cobblestone roads looked
Um,
pretty tricky on a bike.
yeah, well, and sometimes bikers, as you saw, Julie, sometimes bikers are where they really shouldn't be, and they don't get along very well with walkers,
Mm.
which is a little bit of a problem.
And what was it like to do the medieval route from Santiago, swimming upstream per se, and walking
Um,
the opposite direction?
Walk in reverse. It was really interesting because a lot of people would tell me I was going the wrong way, which was kind of an obvious thing to say. And I got kind of tired of that. So I started answering, well, maybe you're going the wrong way, which is kind of a philosophical little thing, which made some people rather confused. But it's a completely different route if you're going reverse. You don't you
Mhm.
don't have your Camino family. You don't make as many friends,
Mm.
but you see things in a different way than you do when you're going forward.
Mhm. Well, there you go, everyone. Food for thought if you'd like to do it in reverse one day too. So the Pilgrim's Office keeps really great statistics, and in 2023, you can see over 400,000 pilgrims successfully completed a Camino route, could be any of the ones we mentioned. And in order to be qualified in these numbers and these statistics, you would have had to register yourself and put in for a certificate of completion, which we'll talk about a little later in this presentation. But I just wanted to call attention to, even though walking is the most popular, there are other ways to do it. And Anne, I was wondering if you could touch on sailing and if you've seen equestrians and pilgrims in wheelchairs.
Um, I saw a group in wheelchairs several years ago, which would be, of course, a very large challenge. I think I read somewhere that there's a group that does that every year. They have everything figured out so they can do all the logistics for people who are in wheelchairs. Um, and sailing, they sail into Coruña or Ferrol, which are two big cities a little bit north of Santiago, and walk down on the English route.
Mm, terrific. So we mentioned the certificate. Another thing that's really fun about the Camino is your pilgrim passport. And on the AGC trip, Anne takes care of this for us, which is really nice. And so at the beginning of the trip, you get your pilgrim passport, and at every cafe or hotel or tourist kiosk or store, you usually have the option somewhere on the countertop is a stamp, and each organization has their own unique stamp they make it. And so it's a really fun way to keep track of where you've been. And even though we have a group trip, everyone's passport looks pretty different by the end of the trip. And you can see the big red globular stamp. At one of the places we stopped, they have the option for a wax stamp, which is really cool. So they'll take a lighter to it and then make an impression. And it's just a really nice keepsake. I have mine framed on the wall next to my certificate. So it's a fun reminder each day. And Anne, anything you'd like to add about the passport or certificate?
Well, my favorite stamp is the one with the footprints and the paw prints. That is Walter, who walked the Camino with his dog a number of years ago. The dog is a little bit old now, probably would not do that very well. But I can also say that I do this every trip. I have like 30 of these by now because it's fun. It's really kind of like a treasure hunt, finding your stamps and getting the stamps. And then at the end of the or sometime during the trip, the concept of stamp envy will come up because people will look at someone will look at your passport. Where did you get that stamp? I don't have that one. So there's a little bit of a fun thing there to try to get as many as you can, even though you really only need 2 a day after Santiago. That's what after Sarria, which is the 100-kilometer marker, more or less. You need 2 a day after Sarria to get your completion certificate. But it's really fun. It ends up in a little, not quite a competition, but almost. And the fun thing that you really can't see on the completion certificate, which is the certificate with all the medieval looking stuff, it's in Latin. So when I get your details, I'll ask for, already asked Jen to get everybody's full name. So when I request a completion certificate, they can figure out Dorothy, but they probably cannot figure out Dottie, for example. And if they can't figure out your name in Latin, they'll put your name in Latin, which I think is pretty cool. So.
And then also wanted to touch on the shell, the scallop shell. According to legend, it was used by pilgrims to scoop water to drink, and then it became a way to mark the route. And now you'll see it everywhere, from route markers to souvenirs to things people hang on their backpacks to tattoos people get sometimes at the end of their journey or the end of the AGC trip. And there are lots of options to get shells on the AGC trip. Anything that you wanted to add about the shells, Anne?
Well, just one tiny thing. The shell will everyone will select their own shell on our first walk on our short day, the day we transfer up to Galicia. They're all different. And I think sometimes it's more fun to have people select their own because one shell might call to you more than another. My shell is plain. A lot of them have the Santiago cross on them, which is a cross that looks a little bit like a sword because he was beheaded with a sword. But I prefer the plain shell with no cross. But you'll have that choice when you pick out your shell.
And they usually come with a hole in the top and a little lanyard, so you can hang it on your backpack or wear it as jewelry. I turned mine into a tree ornament. So now we're going to talk about AGC's Camino trip. As Anne mentioned, there is a really nice warm-up day to get a sense of the Camino and to also make sure your equipment feels good. And then on day 3 is when we start doing the true inn-to-inn or lodge-to-lodge of the Camino. And I would say AGC's trip is pretty unique in that most other tour operators, because they have larger groups or so many dates per year that they have to contract with bigger hotels that are farther off of the trail, And so AGC's trip is really nice because you get the pilgrim experience without a lot of the pilgrim headaches that would come from doing it on your own, right? Of having to figure out where you're going to sleep each night. And our luggage is shuttled around for us. So each day you wake up, you have breakfast around 7, and then we start walking around 8 or 8:30. And then we'll meet up. We'll have meetup spots a couple times per day. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the next slide. But as you can see, it is what we would consider a more challenging level 3 trip. So there is a 15-mile day. The nice thing is there's a support van that meets us at 4 different times that day. So even if you start the day thinking, I want to hike the whole 15 miles, and then you get halfway through the day and think, I would much rather sit at a cafe and sip my espresso, then that's totally fine. You have that option, which is great. And the reverse too. You can always shuttle ahead and then join the group at lunch. We have altered the itinerary based on feedback. We now include a free day to explore Santiago. We used to split day 8 into 2 shorter days. But at that point in the trip, people have kind of gotten their pilgrim legs under them. And so a 13.5-mile day wasn't too bad. And everyone really enjoyed having the full free day to explore in Santiago because there's so much to do and see there. And then you'll notice that where you arrive and depart from the trip is different. And that's on purpose to make it the most convenient. So Madrid is a major airport, easy to find those flights from the US. And then to get from Santiago to Madrid, you have a couple different options, whether that's taking a little hopper flight back, and there are pretty good schedules there too, or you can take a scenic train ride. And I was just looking at the timetables this morning, and they have quite a few 3-hour express trains, which honestly is about how long it took me to fly when I did the trip in 2022, thinking about having to get to the airport early and check in, et cetera, et cetera. So about the same time door to door. And any other thoughts about the itinerary?
Not really. I just want to mention that the 15-miler looks really long, but as Julie said, we do have 4 meetups that day. We have second breakfast, lunch, ice cream stop, and what I call Last Chance Cafe. So those are 4 places where you can hop in the van. So that day, most people actually end up doing pretty well on that day. My personal challenge is day 6, which is a lot shorter, but it's hilly. So I just kind of have to put my hill walker mentality on and try to do it, because that day is the day that's harder for me.
Mm-hmm. And you'll see sometimes we encounter other pilgrims in flip-flops because they're so tired of their shoes. They might have run into blisters. They're over it. They're limping on the side. That won't be us. We're going to take great care of our feet on this trip. But it is really important to train. The picture that we selected for this slide makes everything look pretty flat and sturdy and easy. But as Anne mentioned, there are definitely some steep hill sections. So when you're training, if you can get all your gear together and mimic those real-time conditions, you'll be much better off. So as we mentioned, your luggage is transported each day. Anne has a wonderful driver who she's been working with for years, and it's the same driver every day. And so you just have to carry what you need, your day pack with your water, snacks, rain gear, etc. And some people in the past have said, oh, did I really need to bring so much water? And there are spots on the Camino where there are cafes, it feels like every 200 yards. And then there are spots like this picture where you're in the middle of farmland. And so, yes, we encourage everybody to bring enough water so that you're not stuck having to wait for the next cafe around the corner. And there are a couple different ways to do the AGC Camino trip. So I say stick close to Anne if you really want to delve into the rich history of each day and the really special landmarks that not a lot of the solo pilgrims will see, or even the pilgrims on a guided trip that are in a larger group. They may not have this option. And then there's also time for some quiet contemplation. If you want to stroll on your own, that's totally fine. I would say if someone's coming on this trip and they don't want a group experience, then this might not be the best trip for you. We do take care of all the logistics, which is nice, but there is a lot of camaraderie that comes with every AGC trip for all of us that have been going on AGC trips for years. And then the other fun part about the Camino is getting to meet other walkers out there. So you'll find people from all over the world, and they're walking for all different sorts of reasons. And it's really nice to find someone when you fall into step together, and the conversation are pretty natural and easy. There was one trip where one of our participants was a journalist, and so she had just a blast kind of interviewing or sussing out more details from people she met along the way. Great. On to the next. So the accommodations. Anne has been working with hotel vendors, often family-run places that are smaller, for years, and we so appreciate these relationships that she's cultivated. Often when we check in, they greet her by name, and they're asking her about her cats or her other adventures. And it's a really nice variety. So as I mentioned, they're all trailside. They're all right next to the Camino. And the rooms vary, but on each AGC Camino trip, we have 2 single room spots. So that's your own room and your own bathroom, and then 8 shared room spots. And they usually always provide breakfast. Anything else, Anne?
Well, most of them, yes, they all have breakfast. Some of them have dinner, and some of them we have dinner out of the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yes, I do try for small family-run places. At one little place, the photo kind of in the middle with someone with a blue jacket. That's a small guest house, and we have the whole place.
Mm-hmm.
There's 8 rooms, and it's just for us.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. Oh, and I forgot to mention, they also have laundry, which is really nice. So don't feel like you have to pack a ton. The food. One of my favorite parts about the Camino is how good the food is. You know, I think about my other adventures with long hikes, and the food was pretty miserable because I was making it over a camp stove. But this is a luxury that is not spared on the AGC Camino trip. So as Anne mentioned, we'll eat quite a few dinners and lunches out in cafes or restaurants. And so you'll find a wide selection of food, everything from hyper-local salads, like in the top right corner, to more national dishes like paella in the bottom left corner. And then we also get a chance to try octopus if you're into seafood. A lot of people are surprised at how delicious it is. And we can accommodate quite a variety of dietary needs. But if you're stacking them up, like if you're gluten-free, vegetarian, et cetera, that might be a little more challenging. And anything to add?
No, just to encourage people. The octopus is at a really, really fun place. You don't have to eat the octopus, but I would recommend coming with us and eating something else because the restaurant itself is so fun. And yes, people are often surprised at how much they like the octopus.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. I was surprised at how much I liked it. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention friendships. This is a common theme on AGC trips and one reason why we all love AGC. But on the Camino, because you're eliminating so many of the distractions of everyday life and you just get to walk all day, every day, it's really easy to become fast friends with your fellow participants and then also other pilgrims. So some fun things in the past that we've done, people have gotten matching bracelets or matching rings. And I'll let you talk about the rings.
Well, I'm wearing mine right now. That's me. Since you can't see my face, that's my hand in the upper right-hand corner, purple, which is kind of my color. Um, the ring has a word on it, which is ultreia, Ultreia, which is part of a medieval hymn marching song. The traditional greeting on the Camino is Buen Camino, which means have a good journey. And Ultreia is kind of the same thing with a little bit more. It's kind of a little bit more celebratory and a little bit more have a good journey, have a good life, onward, upward, and all that. And the other side of the ring has some symbols that are Camino symbols. And inside the ring, which people don't always notice, first of all, it says the Camino in like 3 different languages. Um,
Mm.
it's a lovely, I never take it off. It's one of these things that's just kind of, well, I'm married to the Camino basically, but a lot of people get it because it's such a lovely, lovely keepsake.
Hmm. And I mentioned it before, but sometimes people get tattoos too of the scallop shell or other Camino memorabilia. And so on that free day in Santiago, if your heart is feeling called to a tattoo, there is time and space for that.
Yes,
I,
I have a shell. Of course, I have a Camino tattoo. I have a shell on my right ankle, and I can recommend 2 places in Santiago if anyone's interested.
oh, terrific. I also wanted to add that if you are a naturally introverted person, there is also a place for you on this trip. You don't have to do the walking and chatting routine. You can have the solitude. It's up to you. Okay, so now our question and answer session. Jen, are you able to read off any questions?
Sure, we only have one so far, so if anybody has any they would like to add, please go ahead and type them into the chat. But our first question is, which route is the least crowded?
Great question.
Um, that's a really challenging question. The Camino Frances, the classic Camino, it has the most people, but that depends on the time of year you go. And it even depends, and this is a funny little trick. So this is a secret. Okay. It depends on the date and the day of the week that you start. Because there are surges of pilgrims, because most people start from the traditional starting places on a Saturday or a Sunday at the very beginning of the month or right at the middle of the month, because that's how we conceive of our vacations. But if you can get out of those parameters, even the French route in fairly high season is not that crowded. The other route that's really moving quickly in popularity is the Portuguese route. A route that is not so crowded but is a lot more challenging is the Camino Primitivo. That's like the very first Primitivo, the primitive route, the original route. That's from Oviedo in Asturias, and it was the route that Alfonso II, when he learned that the tomb had been discovered, that's the route that he took. It's a little bit shorter. It's a lot shorter. That's about 10 days instead of a month from the Pyrenees. Eh, but it goes over some pretty important mountains. I can also say that you don't. One thing that I've really noticed when I talk to people on the Camino, when I'm not with, especially when I'm not with AGC, I talk to people a lot more, other people a lot more. Um, um, there are 3 questions that you ask, and I'm changing the subject just a little. Sorry. You ask, you can ask people, where are you from? Where did you start? And how long have you been on the trail? And I have really noticed that people who don't start in Saint John, which is the French town just on the other side of the Pyrenees, sound a little bit apologetic. Now, our route, of course, is starting in Santiago instead of Saint John, but I'm guessing that at least some of you will do a longer Camino at some time in the future. Don't feel that you have to start in Saint John. Start wherever you can wherever you want to start. The first day over the Pyrenees is really quite challenging. But the other part of that is that if you start at an unusual place on an off day, even the French route will not be crowded.
That's great advice. And I'd say even for the AGC trip, there were a couple days there where I felt like because we were staying right on the trail and doing mileage that was a little off kilter of what was normal, that I would have chunks of time where I didn't see many people. And then on the flip side too, people tend to group up by the really delicious cafes. And so it could feel crowded around there. But for the most part, it was really pleasant and there were stretches of peace and tranquility. I see another question came through. Melody, thanks for asking. Would you please describe the weather differences between the spring and fall dates? So again, we have a trip in June and a trip in September. And Anne, I'll let you speak to that.
Well, first of all, weather's going to do what weather's going to do. Have usually been pretty lucky with not having really rainy days. Usually in the past, we've done the spring trip at the end of May, which is a little bit more risky for weather. We've moved that to June. June and mid-June and mid-September, they're very similar. They can both be rather warm and they can both be rather cool, or they can rain. There's maybe a little bit more chance of rain in September than in June, but not a whole lot. September, people from Galicia, where the region where we'll be, people say that September weather is better than August weather, because in August there's more of a chance of thunderstorms in the afternoon and evening. But yeah, weather is weather. So.
And because we have the June and September trips, and the weather's so similar, we only have one packing list on the website. So as long as you follow the packing list, you'll feel prepared for whatever June or September throws your way. Another question came in from Leslie. Do we have set roommates for every night, or is it kind of first come, first serve? So if you sign up for a shared room spot at every lodge, you would switch roommates on the AGC trip. Oh, and Leslie had asked, would tennis shoes be a good alternative to hiking boots? Yes. So you can kind of see in the picture here on the bridge, the stone bridge, that a lot of people are wearing what I would consider trail runners instead of more classical hiking boots. And then in the picture on the right around the shell, two of the people they wore low top hiking boots. So really it's what you feel most comfortable in. I will say Ultras are a very popular option. They have that wide toe box. 3 out of the 6 feet in the shell picture are wearing Ultras.
Can I add just a tiny thing here that some people might not even know about? Those of you who have not heard about dirty girl gaiters, you might want to think about that. You see, the purple shoe is mine, purple, of course. Yes, dirty girl gaiters. The purple shoe and the blue shoe, they both have something that has like a little triangle there. Those are non-waterproof gaiters. They go over the top of your shoe and keep rocks and sticks out of your shoes. They really work.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't hike anywhere without them anymore, because I used to get a lot of stuff in my shoes and I no longer do.
Mm-hmm. And you can see that they attach just at the lace on top, and then they usually come with a Velcro attachment at the back. Some trail runner shoes are built with a Velcro attachment. Otherwise, it's easy enough to glue one onto the back of your shoe. And like Anne said, they're non-waterproof, so they are breathable, which is great.
And I can say one problem you will have with dirty girl gaiters is deciding which ones you want, because they have a whole bunch of colors and a whole bunch of patterns. The one at the top, the blue one, that they actually have a Camino gaiter, which is what that one is. Mine of course is in purple and pink. but they really are, they really work, and they're very, very useful.
Yes, and Roxanne, you had mentioned Kulaklas are great too. If you haven't heard of Kulaklas, it's a little antimicrobial square, and it's good for peeing on the trail side. You know, we can't always get to a cafe bathroom, so this is a good alternative to having to carry and pack out toilet paper after you wipe with it, and it's just for urine. Doesn't work for number two. You would then just snap it together and clip it to the outside of your backpack. And then when you get to your lodging for the night, you can wash it out with soap and water in the sink, dry it, and it's good to go for the next day too. So lots of equipment tips and tricks. Wonderful. Well, that's a great note to end on. Thanks everyone for joining. And if you think of anything after the webinar, feel free to reach out to me. And you'll have my email when we send out the webinar recording. I hope everyone has a great day and buen camino. And thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks to everybody for participating.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
See
you.
ya. Thank you.
Bye.